Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Quantum Recovery Podcast. It is just me this week, and I'm going to be talking about my history with yo-yo dieting and what I have found as an answer, if you will. And I'm not talking about following another dogma here. I am talking about the quantum knowledge that I have gathered that has allowed me really freedom. And I think this is really fitting following last week's podcast, where Isabella shared her story of recovering from an eating disorder. So now, if you haven't listened to my story yet, you can go back and do that. But I am also in recovery from bulimia. So I struggled with that just as long as I had my addiction. So actually longer, probably 20 years, I would say. And I'm in recovery from substance use 16 years. So that just kind of gives you an idea. I had a lot of body dysmorphia, but in the moving into my recovery, I always thought I had to find a way to eat. I thought I needed healing and I was always broken. I was holding this belief that was not serving me. That was not serving me, having a belief that is like, oh, Andia, you're always healing. You need to eat, constantly trying to search for a way to eat. And a lot of times it was very dogmatic. So meaning that there were people that were really like they never saw the gray area. They were very, I start just to let you know, I in my early recovery, I was a vegan, so I wasn't eating any meat, like, and just like caveat here, I guess, is, I do eat animal products, and I want you to know that the things that I eat, they're sourced from a regenerative farm. So it's very important that I just mentioned that. And I talk about a lot about this in a webinar that I'm going to be sharing with you all today. It's a webinar I did with Sydney from Brighter Being Wellness, and she is a functional nutritionist, and me having my quantum background, we got together and did this webinar, and it was so cool because it really gives you the full picture of what I'm talking about today. I am just going to touch on a couple of little things, but the all in all, you can get every single piece of all the breakdown of this whole topic in that webinar, and it's $33. It's very reasonably priced. I will put a link for it. We created this for a reason. See, I don't have the nutritional background. However, it is something that I've been passionate about my whole life. I've been always passionate about learning about nutrition. So, and I can't say I know all the science behind like what, you know, a dietitian may know or anything like that. I don't know how to read labs, that kind of stuff. Sydney does. So that's why we did this webinar together, because I think that there is a lot of light to be shed, no pun intended, I guess, on how we eat. So it's really, really important that we're eating seasonal food and local food. Now, with my yo-yo dieting, I slowly progressed into, I was vegan and then I turned into a pescatarian. So I was willing to eat fish, which is really great because there's DHA in the fish, which was, helpful for me to starting to get some full protein and nutrients. And plus, whenever I was vegan or eating vegetarian, I was eating a enormous amount of processed food. It was pretty much junk food vegan. Like if a bag of food said vegan on it, like I didn't know what I know now about processed food. I did not realize how addictive it was, and I didn't really read labels at that time. So if something said it was vegan, I would just assume it was healthy and I would consume it. See things so much differently now. So I eat as only whole foods now. And now I don't want people to like I don't want you to put me on a pedestal. I am not perfect. Every single once in a while, I still will succumb and have a sugar craving and I will eat something sweet. Like, I do not want you to think I am a perfect human. I am not by any means. But on most days, I am eating quite well. So that is, I just want to share that with people because I think a lot of times, myself included, I would listen to somebody talking about, how, something like I'm talking about today, like really good information. That's truth. I wouldn't be sharing this with you if I didn't believe it to be the truth and there wasn't research behind it. So I would take that person who was talking and I'd put them up on this pedestal, like, oh, that person, I want to be just like them and I want to eat like them. And they must just find this so easy. And like I did that with a coach that I worked with for a long time. And that did not serve me. It it did not serve me. It was not a good, I was literally putting the way that I was eating and the information I was searching for, I was embedding it into my identity. Not healthy, folks, not healthy. It wasn't healthy for me. It didn't serve me. So I want to just share that. And that's why I'm sharing that, because I don't want you to put me on this pedestal like, oh, India does everything perfectly. Like right now, I'm not in the perfect light environment because I'm recording. I'm just not. I have to wear my blue blockers. I have to look at a screen next to me. And, I have iris on my computer, but still, like, this is not this is a blue light. Behind me is a blue light. So I'm just saying, like, there are time and space for where I actually have to put myself in that environment. But for the most part, I'm getting outside as much as I can during the day, as much as I can, taking those light breaks. So anyway, not to get off topic, but I've always struggled with my weight. And I believe, at least in my experience, and with all the people that I've helped with addiction, a lot of people they're down on themselves because they enter in recovery and they gain weight. There's a lot of sugar cravings. And I used to always just, explain this as like, oh, yes, your the way your body metabolizes alcohol, it's a sugar, and the way it breaks it down, it makes sense that we have sugar cravings. And yes, it does in that sense, but we also have a lot of mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, in the past episode, I talked about post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Post-acute withdrawal syndrome is things like mood swings, sleep issues, anxiety, depression, irritability, low stress tolerance, insomnia, memory issues, all sorts of things. There's a lot of different pause symptoms. Well, when you think about those symptoms, and then 2 weeks ago when I chatted with you about mitochondria, what is pause? What is post-acute withdrawal syndrome really at its core? It's mitochondrial dysfunction. That's what it is at its core, because it's different little inflammations, depending on which ones are showing up, is going to be different for everybody. They're all going to be heightened at you might have a 10 on sleep, like you cannot sleep, it's the worst, but your anxiety might be really low. Like, you're not going to have all these symptoms like at a 10. You might have multiple ones at a 10, and that can actually lead people to return to use because they know that if they use the substance, that those symptoms are going to go away. It's the easy way. It's what we were comfortable with. It's what we knew. And there's lots of neural connections happening in our brain that are syncing of like use. This is how I solved my problems. I'm just going to use. Those neurons are still glued together. And it takes a lot of different behavioral change to really break those neurons up. So I'm using my fingers as a model, if you will, for the synapses, right? So all of those neurons were talking to each other a long time. They got glued together. Neurons that fire together are wired together. That's the whole saying. So we know now that, neuroplasticity is real and our brain can change. When I was in my active use, that was not the case on the TV. I remember watching a news clip about how this girl was using ecstasy and methamphetamine, and they showed a picture of her brain, and they were basically saying like, this is permanent damage. That's what they were relaying on the news. And so way back then, that's what I was thinking. Like, I thought it was all permanent. So I was devastated. So I was like, well, I already probably have really a lot of brain damage, so I might as well just keep using. And then, another decade went on where I continued to use. So that was, my gosh, that was like in the late 90s where I probably watched that. So all of this to say is that those pause symptoms, that's mitochondrial dysfunction. And what we are trying to do here on a quantum level is look at the small things, which are our mitochondria, and we want to do things that nurture and heal those little antennas that are sensing our environment. Because we're living in this modern world, we have all these things coming in, including our metabolism. Most of us come into early recovery and we are we have metabolical damage. And many of us are insulin resistant. Well, before there's insulin resistance, there's actually leptin resistance. And leptin is a circadian hormone. So I want to talk a little bit about that today, because this is something I don't really touch on in the webinar. So I wanted to share a little glimpse of it with you and some things to do. But many of you, and you can get this tested if you want to, but like that's not my forte of knowing all the things about lab work or whatever. But it's definitely something you can know if you're there. So there's high leptin and low leptin. High leptin is usually over a 10 to a 12 is going to be considered high, and low is like a 2. So we want to be somewhere in the middle of that. So the only way to really know that is going to, you're going to have to go to a lab and get a test or ask your doctor for a test. And this is not medical advice, by the way. This is just educating you on what I know and what I've learned. So with that yo-yo dieting story, so I'm yo-yo dieting and I learned paleo and what that was, and I started eating that way. I tried all the things. I ate plant paradox. I did then I did keto, and then I had just learned plant paradox. So then I was doing plant paradox keto. Anyway, the list goes on. I ended up being more carnivore keto eating. And I learned a lot about nutrient dense food, how to source my food from my farmers, how to have a relationship with my farmer, and what that meant, what it meant to have, like, I learned a little bit about soil and how important that was. And also what I came to learn when I entered the quantum space is how important it is to eat seasonally and locally. So that has everything to do with heat, like nurturing and feeding the mitochondria in a way that is going to allow them to function properly. Because remember, I was talking about the swelling of the mitochondria and how that's inflammation. So we want to heal that. And the way we heal it is by giving it the right signal. One of the signals we give it in the circadian 24-hour a day is our eating. And the timing of our eating is almost more important than what we're eating. But however, what we are eating is very important as well, but the timing of the eating, because remember, circadian is all about timing. So just to explain leptin really quick so we understand that, and then I want to get into the circadian piece. So leptin's a circadian hormone, and it comes from our fat cells, and it tells our brain how to use energy if we're hungry or not. And then we get that release of ghrelin, which is when we have an empty stomach. So if leptin is high after we eat, so then we stop eating. Well, with leptin resistance, we don't get that messaging. And now think about that, how we can layer upon this processed foods, forever chemicals, microplastics, all of those things bioaccumulate, and it's impacting the mitochondria, and it's messing with the signaling. And then add on top of that a bad light environment, so we're not getting the right light signals. Now, I don't mean to overwhelm you, but I'm just saying that this is something that behavioral changes can address this and reverse it. And so, yeah, and processed food and PFAS and all of that is that's kind of how I got into this space, is learning about microplastics and toxins and whatnot. So that's another story for a different day, but I'm just saying those things, I think it's pretty well known now. There's lots of awareness around this on the internet and whatnot. We are learning about these products that we're buying and how they can be poisonous to our system, like Teflon pans and things like that. They're endocrine disruptors, meaning they disrupt our hormones. Well, so does a bad light environment. That's going to mess up our hormone. Like, our hormones don't even have a chance to get on track unless our light environment is right. So now when leptin works, it tells the brain how to use the energy, and it regulates our appetite correctly, and it's wonderful. And what leptin has to do at night is it docks to the hypothalamus. Well, the hypothalamus, remember how I talk about the addiction pathway? It's like Grand Central Station, I call it. So the hypothalamus is right in there. Remember, everything is connected. So leptin has to dock to the hypothalamus at night. Well, that is not going to happen if your light environment is not right. And it's definitely not going to happen if you're eating at the wrong time. And I know a lot of you are going to cringe, but if we are eating after sunset, so when it's dark outside, that is a bad signal. That's a mismatch signal. We want to consume food when it's light out. So yeah, leptin docks to the hypothalamus at night, and it will give the brain an inventory basically of how much body fat that we have. Now, remember, everything's connected, and the hypothalamus is controlling body temperature. It's controlling hunger, thirst, sleep, stress response. It interacts with the nucleus accumbens, which is the on-off switch for addiction, right? So that all of that is happening in the same place. So this is something that we do want to talk about in the addiction space is leptin, because it's regulating all of the axes that are happening. So there's all different types of them. I'm not going to overwhelm you with those, but they regulate our body, and it's super important for proper signaling and healing. And we're never going to have the proper signaling and healing if we don't have the light environment right. So this is why the course that I've created, not only the webinar that I'm mainly talking about today, that nutritional webinar, I think the Nutrition Through the Quantum Lens webinar is going to be really key to understanding just the basics of the importance of why eating seasonally and locally is so important for our mitochondrial health. But my course that I created, the Quantum Recovery Reset, that gives you the foundation, and it gives you the foundation to actually do work like resetting leptin. Because before, so if you're like diabetic, or you have some kind of metabolic disease, or if you are pre-diabetic or anything like that, you're going to be leptin resistant. Well, before or not leptin resistant, you're insulin resistant. And before you're insulin resistant, you're actually leptin resistant. So that's why if you are that insulin resistance, you by default, you are leptin resistant. So the some of the improper signaling that's happening is going to be when we eat after sunset. So if we're eating after dark, or if we're eating before sunrise, it's still dark out. So leptin is not going to dock, and that is going to just set us up for no success. We are going to continue to struggle. So, we're going to continue to not be able to lose weight. We are going to continue to have hunger cravings, sugar cravings, all the things. So another improper signal is eating carbs out of season. So carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables, all that. If you are eating a pineapple in the middle of winter, that, depending on our latitude and where we're living, that's not growing by you. We can't eat that. It's going to cause mitochondrial chaos in the cells. And that's going to just cascade and lead into other things. So when we have a certain amount of mitochondrial dysfunction, that's when dis-ease manifests. Okay. So just to set the stage for that. So we also don't want to overeat or undereat, of course, but with this imbalance of signaling, like, it's no wonder that we're overeating and undereating. And then when you add processed addictive foods into the picture, like, it's just going to feed the problem, right? So if you relate to my story and you've yo-yo dieted for years, you very well may be leptin resistant. I'm not saying that you are like 100%, but you could be. And it's a good thing to get tested. And it's really, there's simple light practices and things that we can do to address this, because it is circadian. It's a circadian hormone. So all of the light teaching that I've done on this podcast and that I do in my course, it all speaks to this. These behavioral changes, you're going to want to put those into place so you can address leptin resistance if it is an issue for you. And many of us struggle with, gaining weight in a short period, really short amount of time. Our light environment is also raising our cortisol at the wrong times. That is going to be an issue. And, if you're looking at your phone before sunrise, or if you're looking at your phone after sunset and you're not wearing blue blocking glasses, not good, right? This is going to influence it. And some things we can do are all the light environment pieces that I've talked about on this podcast. Eating breakfast. One of the things I have talked about a lot is seeing sunrise. Seeing sunrise is going to do so many things. So one of the most profound things I noticed when I started doing regular sunrise, I know you are going to flip when I say this, but I didn't really need coffee. I had energy. And I also started to get hungry in the morning because I was one of those person doing intermittent fasting, and I was pretty much starving myself until like 1 or 2 p.m. and then not eating, and sometimes eating just the one meal a day. Remember, food is a circadian signal. We want to make sure we're eating in the morning, but it took me a while to work up to that. When somebody told me that and I was doing this work, I wasn't able to just drop everything and start eating breakfast. I wasn't hungry for breakfast at all. So if you are right there, I am right here with you to support you, because when you start seeing sunrise, you will actually one day you will wake up and you will be getting that light in your eyes and you're going to be like, oh, I'm hungry for breakfast. And then we are going to be able to eat the right foods for the right signaling. In the morning, we want a nice high protein, high fat meal in the morning to really set us up for success. So eating before sunset is also something that definitely took me a few months to get used to, because I'm one of those people who love to snack. And that is another thing I had to give up, is snacking. But over time, I was able to do it. All of these things did not happen overnight. So I don't want to overwhelm you, but I do want you to be aware, because this is something that I became aware of that I had no idea about. Was it overwhelming when I learned about it? Yeah, it was a little overwhelming because I was like, wow, I have to do a lot of change in order to get these benefits that I want to see. Like, I'd love to be able to lose this last 10, 15 pounds that have been just stuck on my body. I would love to feel comfortable again. And at this time in my life, I was in a healthy place. I didn't have the body dysmorphia. I didn't have the bulimia issues, but I still wanted to feel good in my body and confident. And I was just not feeling that way. And it was because I was still eating some processed food. I wasn't perfect. Like I said, this journey has been a long one, and it has been learning little things and then just making little tiny shifts. And that's what I'm here as your coach to support you on. These are going to be things that are not going to come easy. And there are things that you might not even want to do. You might be in a stage of change like, hell no, Andy, I'm not doing that. I love eating my, sweet treat at night while I watch TV. Yeah, so we're getting that glucose blood rise, and then we're getting that blue light blasting, which is also raising our glucose. And then on top of that, we are getting that wrong signal because it's dark outside. It's just this like chaos. And so this circadian health that I'm talking about and that I'm teaching you about is something that I'm very, very passionate about. And it did not come easy for me to like just make all these changes. And I want you to know I'm here for you. And the course that I created is for you. The webinar I created about the nutrition piece is for you because I knew people would be asking questions about this. And I do want to create a course that's specific to this hormone that I'm talking about, this leptin hormone, and that is coming for you. But right now, I want you to be able to embrace some of these other foundational ideas that really have to, or in some of this foundational education that really, we need to really wrap our brain around some of this, some of the light piece and some of these basic circadian rhythm shifts before we can address that. And, nutrition is a topic that I've been passionate about for a very, very long time. And I always felt like there was always something missing. I didn't know the answers. I didn't know what it was, but I constantly went to, and it was really just diet dogma. I was almost addicted to it. Like, okay, if this one doesn't work, I know I'll find another one that might be the answer. So let me just try this blood type diet and see if this is it. Like, there's just so many, like, I know many of you can relate of trying all of these different ways of eating that are supposed to be the way for me so I can heal, right? Well, let me tell you, the answer is in addressing our circadian health, and it's as simple as following Mother Nature's rules, and that's eating seasonally and locally. And I go into deep dives about why that's important, and so you can wrap your brain around that. I touched on the mitochondria 2 weeks ago, so if you haven't listened to that episode, do listen to that, because I explain a little bit about what mitochondria is and what inflammation looks like in the body, what causes chaos, and Yeah, so in the nutrition webinar or nutrition through a quantum lens, you are going to understand what the nutrient dense food is. This is almost a 2-hour webinar. It's like an hour and 45 minutes, I think. And you're also going to get a really intensive guide. You're going to get a guide on how to source food, what that looks like. You're going to learn how mitochondria come into play, and also how our sunlight practice comes into play. Because remember, Mother Nature is the answer. Everything comes back to just following her rules. And we're living in such a modern world environment that we actually have to unlearn some things. And, we have to have an acceptance around that. And sometimes a surrender, some of the same things that we do when we are coming into recovery. We're accepting prayer on Big Book, page 417, acceptance prayer, right? We are doing some of this work as we go on our health journey too. We have to surrender, we have to accept, we have to be honest, open, and willing. It's very related. So I hope this lesson was helpful. I hope you aren't too overwhelmed, because trust me, if I can do it, you can do it. And yeah, I will see you next week. The links for the course and the webinar are going to be in the show notes. And with that, drink water. I will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found value in this information. And if you did, please share it. Another way to support the podcast is to leave a 5-star review. If you want to connect, you can message me on Instagram or email me at andiaray@outlook.com. And remember, drink water.